Two cops thought they could humiliate a man who looked like someone they were after, but what they didn't know was that Keenan Rucker had faced real battles, and he wasn't about to lose this one. There comes a time in life when everything you believe about yourself gets tested, and it never gives you a warning for Keenan. That moment came on a hot Saturday. In the afternoon, he was outside, Grady's hardware store, right on the edge of Bismarck, North Dakota. Keenan wasn't thinking about anything serious, just finishing a list his mom had texted him. Garden gloves, a hose nozzle, a few bags of potting soil. Just normal errands. He was dressed like anyone would be after a morning jog, dark gym shorts, a hoodie, sneakers still a bit dusty from the trail, nothing out of the ordinary. But as he opened the heavy glass door to the store, everything changed. "Hey, you stop right there!" a voice shouted. Keenan barely had time to look up before two officers rushed towards him. Deputy Wade Coulson, a big guy with a red face and a constant scowl, grabbed Keenan's shoulder hard, twisting his hoodie. Officer Brent Marbury, younger but just as rough, stepped in to block the door. Keenan lifted his hands quickly, palms open. "What's going on?" he asked, keeping his voice calm but firm. "You know damn well," Coulson snapped. Then without another word, he slammed Keenan against the brick wall outside the store. A loud smack echoed across the parking lot. People turned to look, families loading their cars, a teenager riding his bike, an older man. With a cart full of soil, Keenan didn't fight back. He had been trained not to. "You're making a mistake," he said steadily. Marbury muttered something as he twisted Keenan's arms and locked the handcuffs too tight. "Caught yourself this time." "Huh. Caught doing what Keenan asked." He didn't even stepped inside the store yet. A woman in a sundress froze near her minivan. Teenager pulled out his phone. An older couple whispered by the cart return. People watched, but no one did anything. "My ID's in my back pocket," Keenan said quietly. Coulson ignored him. "You match the description?" he barked, dragging Keenan towards the police car. "What description?" Keenan asked. "You haven't even checked." Coulson laughed, a short, mean sound. "Don't need to." You're at Marbury laughed too, like it was all a joke. They shoved Keenan into the back seat and slammed the door shut. No explanation. No apology. Keenan sat still, staring straight ahead. His heart was racing, but not from fear. It was a slow, deep anger, the kind that comes when you realize that no matter what you've done, no matter how much you've proven yourself to some people, you'll always be nothing. The car sat there, engine running. Finally, a message crackled over the radio. "Wrong guy. Suspect was caught. Cross town. No hoodie, no gym shorts. Doesn't even look the same." Coulson cursed. Marbury's face turned red without a word. They opened the door and uncuffed Keenan right there in the parking lot. No apology, no reason, get out of here. Coulson growled like Keenan was just a stray dog. They were done kicking Keenan. He stood slowly, rubbing his wrists, looked them in the eyes, steady and strong. "You'll hear from me," he said. Coulson snorted. Marbury looked away. Keenan turned and walked back towards the store. People still stared. Some whispered. Others acted like they hadn't seen anything. He grabbed a cart with calm hands and rolled it towards the garden section. Gloves, hose, nozzle, soil business. As usual, at least on the outside. Something inside him had changed him, wasn't going to stay silent. He finished his shopping, but it felt automatic. Body moved, grabbing things, pushing the cart, talking to the cashier. But his mind was elsewhere. The kind of thoughts that make your jaw clench without even noticing. As he loaded the soil into his trunk, pain shot through his wrists. Each time he flexed his hands, the cuffs hadn't been a mistake. They had been cruel. He looked across the parking lot. The officers were gone, but the memory stayed. "Keenan," a voice called. He turned. It was Mr. Dalton, the retired Army vet who ran the pawn shop 2 doors down. Gray hair, old jeans, always smelled like coffee and sawdust. "You okay, son?" Dalton asked with concern all over his face. Keenan gave a small smile. "Yes, Mr. Dalton, just a little misunderstanding." Dalton frowned. "Not. Looked like a misunderstanding to me." Didn't reply. He wasn't ready to talk. Dalton gave him a look. Don't let those boys walk over you, not you." Keenan nodded. "I won't." Dalton patted his shoulder and walked back to his shop. It was a small moment, but it stuck. Keenan drove home, insolence, no music, no news, just the hum of the tires on the road and the thought that something needed to change, not with fists, not with yelling, but with something they couldn't ignore. He parked in his driveway and sat. For a moment, keys still in the ignition neighborhood, was quiet. Small houses line, the street kids' bikes left out, sprinklers ticking away everything. Looked peaceful inside his mom. Francine Rucker called from the kitchen. "That you, baby?" "Yeah, Ma," he said, kicking off his sneakers. She peeked around the corner, wiping her hands. "You get everything?" He smiled for real tired but real, "Yeah, got it all." She watched him a little, longer than usual. Moms know things without needing to ask. "You sure you're okay?" she asked gently. He paused, then nodded, "Just tired." She didn't push, just gave him a look that said she was. There when he was ready after dinner, after dishes, after the house got quiet, Keenan stood in front of the hallway closet, the one with all the things he'd not been able to pack away: his army dress uniform, shiny boots, medals pinned on a velvet board. He pulled out the uniform with steady hands. Tomorrow. He thought tomorrow would be different. He laid it out on the bed jacket. Pants, white. Gloves, the ribbons perfectly aligned the combat infantryman badge, caught the light bright and meaningful. He'd earned that this wasn't about revenge or causing a scene. It was about showing them who he really was and making sure they never forgot. He sat in the chair by the window. The streetlights flickered on his reflection. Looked back, tired eyes, squared shoulders. A man who had faced worse than this, come out stronger. Keenan didn't believe. In acting out of anger, he believed in discipline, in honor. But respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you demand quietly, firmly. He leaned back. Let the chair creak beneath him and closed his eyes. Tomorrow they would see him not through bias, not through fear, but through truth, and no badge or excuse would cover up what they had done. But for that to happen, he had to be ready, for all eyes to be on him. Morning came, heavy with gray skies. Keenan was all ready, dressed by the time the first light touched the curtains. He hadn't slept, not from anger, but from focus. By 6:30, he was buttoning his uniform. The fabric felt strong, familiar. Every piece was like armor-pressed, pants, tailored, jacket, shiny brass. His badge sat above the ribbons, simple. Powerful in the hallway mirror, he adjusted his tie straight and sharp. Then, he put on his boots, polished, so clean. They shone downstairs. Francine stood by the coffee maker, pride and worry in her eyes. "You sure about this?" she asked, handing him a travel mug. Kenna nodded. "It's the only way they'll listen." She didn't argue, just pressed her hand to his chest, right over his heart. "Metals, you walk in there like the man you are making them see it. I will." Keenan said, then closed the door behind him. The sound of the latch was louder than usual. This wasn't just another trip into town, it was a moment of truth. The drive to. The sheriff's office didn't take long. Bismarck wasn't a big city, just big enough that you could go unnoticed if you weren't careful. As he turned onto Avenue C, the small brick building came into view. The American flag fluttered in the cool morning breeze. Keenan parked 2 spaces from the entrance. He shut off the engine and took a deep breath. The weight of the uniform felt reassuring. A few people were nearby, someone with a clipboard, 2 women unlocking their bikes. At first, no one paid him much attention, just another day. But when Keenan stepped out of the truck, something changed. Conversation stopped, people turned to look. He adjusted his gloves, stood tall, and walked to the entrance, slowly and confidently. Every one step had purpose, every breath was steady. Inside, the lobby was filled with quiet voices and ringing phones. A young deputy behind the front desk looked up and froze, his eyes widened. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked stiffly. Keenan removed his hat and held it under his arm. "I'm here to file a formal complaint," he said. Calmly, the deputy swallowed hard. "Chief Bowden is inside, I'll let him know." Keenan nodded, and stepped to the side, standing upright in the center of the room. People started coming into the station, a woman paying a traffic ticket, a man asking about a permit. Each of them paused when they saw Keenan, some whispered. One woman pulled out her phone, pretending to scroll, but clearly recording Chief Bowden came out. 5 minutes later, he was a thin man with graying hair and tired eyes. When he saw Keenan in uniform, he turned pale. "Good morning," Keenan said coolly. Chief Bowden replied, his voice shaky. "Let's, step into my office." "In armament," Keenan said as he took a folded paper from his inside pocket. "I'm filing an official complaint against Deputy Wade Coulson and Officer Brent Marbury assault, wrongful arrest and violation of civil rights." The chief's hand trembled as he accepted the paper. "Understood," he said quietly. Keenan continued, speaking, making sure everyone could hear. "I expect a full investigation, transparent and public." The chief nodded quickly, almost like a bow. The deputy behind the desk stared at his face. Turning red, people kept watching. Recording, whispering. Keenan stood tall like a statue of everything they had tried to ignore. He put his hat back on and walked out. Without waiting for permission, the sunlight hit his face, but he didn't blink. The day was just starting, the town was already buzzing. But Keenan knew this was just the first crack in the wall. Once the truth started, coming out, there would be no stopping it. After Keenan left the sheriff's department, phones wouldn't stop ringing. By noon, whispers in the lobby had turned into full conversations on Main Street, at gas stations, and in barber shops. At Darla's diner, people leaned over their coffee cups and spoke his name. You see, what he was wearing looked like a damn general walking in there. About time someone stood up to them. While Keenan went home and waited. He didn't need Toyel or chase cameras. The truth was spreading on its own, like a slow but unstoppable wave. By late afternoon, news vans began showing up around town. A station from Fargo sent a reporter, Jessica Mullins. She was young, sharp, and determined. Jessica called Keenan, and he answered politely, "I'll give my statement after the department responds." Officially, not before she agreed, and her tone said she respected his choice even more. Back at the station, Chief Bowden sat in his office with his head in his hands. Deputy Coulson paced the room like a trapped animal. Officer Marbury stared at the floor, pale and silent. "They're making a circus out of this," Coulson muttered, punching his palm. "He's not even hurt," Marbury added, weak. Chief Bowden looked up sharply. "You grabbed a man without checking ID, you cuffed a decorated Army veteran in front of half the town, and now you're whining because he's not hurt." Neither of them responded. There was a knock on the door. The mayor's assistant stood there, red-faced and sweating. "The mayor wants to see you," she said to Bowden. "Right now." The chief cursed under his breath. Stood, he knew what was coming. Questions, pressure, and demands. The assistant's anxious look made it clear the mayor didn't want excuses. He wanted answers and probably resignations. Outside in the parking lot, a crowd was starting to gather. Cardboard signs scrolled with words. "Justice for Keenan. We stand with our veterans. Respect is earned." It wasn't just black folks out there. Old ranchers, teenagers in baseball caps, and moms with toddlers on their hips showed up. Town had seen unfairness up close, and this time, they weren't pretending. Didn't Keenan's old high school principal, Mr. A. Landers, even spoke to a reporter. "Keenan Rucker was one of the best young men I ever taught." Landers said, his voice filled with emotion. What happened to him yesterday is a shame this town." Every word hit hard in a small room in the back of the station. Coulson and Marbury sat quietly, could hear every chant and angry voice. Through the thin walls, each one felt worse than a court order. "You think they'll fire us?" Marbury finally asked. In a whisper, Coulson didn't answer him. Knew it was over. No badge was big enough to protect them now. While Keenan was at home, he sat at the kitchen table with his mother, eating baked chicken and green beans like it was just another Sunday. "You proud of yourself?" Francine asked, smiling gently. Keenan shrugged. "Just did what needed to be done." Francine reached over and held his hand. "You did it with grace, that's what matters." Through the window, they could see the lights of the news vans blinking like far-off stars. Didn't stare. He didn't need attention. The important part had already happened. He stood up. He made them look him in the eye, but tomorrow was still coming with it, the real test. Would the system fix itself, or just cover up the problem and pretend it never happened by Monday morning? The small town of Bismarck didn't feel so small anymore. National news had picked up the story first. It was local stations, then bigger. Ones like Channel 7 News, and even a segment on a morning talk show. Kenan's image standing tall, in his uniform, flashed across millions of TV screens. No one cared about the hardware store anymore. The real story was simply 2 officers mistreated a U.S. Army veteran on American soil, and people were outraged outside the sheriff's office. The protest had grown. People brought lawn chairs, coolers, and homemade signs. Some held American flags, not as a threat, but as a symbol. A local preacher, Reverend Cyrus Dalton, stood with a megaphone. He wasn't yelling. He just spoke clearly and calmly. When one of us is treated as less, he said, we are all treated as less. Keenan stayed home. He wasn't hiding. He just didn't want to feed the media frenzy. His phone rang. Non-stop calls from old Army friends, past teachers, even strangers from other towns. One message stood out. You reminded us what quiet strength looks like. Thank you. You meanwhile, pressure inside the sheriff's office was rising. Chief Bowden had no choice. He placed both Deputy Wade Coulson and Officer Brent Marbury on administrative leave while a broad investigation began. The announcement came at a quickly arranged press conference. Bowden looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. We take these accusations seriously, he said, glancing nervously behind him. Next to him stood our representative from the state's Office of Professional Standards Arms, crossed, watching everything. Reporters shouted, questions fast and hard. Why weren't IDs checked? Will the officers face criminal charges? How can people trust this department after what happened? Bowden gave vague, unhelpful answers. Then someone from the back asked loudly, would you have cuffed him if he'd been in uniform? The room went quiet. Bowden didn't respond. He didn't have to go outside. The crowd got louder. Signs bounced in the air. Kids sat on their father's shoulders to see elderly couples stood arm in arm, shaking their heads in disbelief. At home, Keenan sat on the porch with Francine sipping sweet tea. You could probably run for mayor now, she joked. Keenan laughed, a real honest laugh he hadn't felt in a while. Not mine. He said, I'm not trying to be anyone's hero. You already are. Francine replied. Cars honked as they drove by. People waved. Neighbors dropped off pièces casseroles and thank you notes and envelopes. It was a lot, but Keenan received it all with the same quiet strength that had carried him through everything. Later that night, sitting alone in the living room, Keenan flipped through the local news channels. They kept showing footage of him he didn't look angry in the sheriff's lobby. The video, he looked calm, like a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Commentators debated on air. This isn't just about one man, said a panelist. This is about a pattern, and it's about respect. Another person said, when someone like Staff Sergeant Rucker is treated this way, it reminds everyone, veteran and every citizen, that their service can be erased by ignorance in an instant. The conversation wasn't just about Keenan anymore. It became about something bigger. People started asking serious questions and refused to let them be ignored, but Keenan understood that attention could be dangerous. The real challenge would be making sure the moment didn't disappear. Once the cameras left, the investigation moved faster than expected. Just 3 days after public anger reached its peak, Deputy Wade Coulson and Officer Brent Marbury were officially suspended without pay termination. Hearings were scheduled. Wasn't just the pressure from the town. Veteran groups from all over the North Dakota flooded City Hall with letters, phone calls, and emails demanding real consequences. A group of retired Marines, Evan drove in from Minette. They held a silent vigil outside the station for 24 hours straight. Standing tall in spotless dress uniforms, under the sun, watched it all quietly. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew too much. Attention could change a man. He agreed to do only one interview with Jessica Mullins from Channel 7. No drama, No big produce, just his words and the truth. The interview happened in Memorial Park under the old oak trees near the Veterans Monument. Kanan wore jeans and a plain black t-shirt. No uniform he didn't, Jessica asked the first question carefully. When they grabbed you, what was going through your mind? Keenan paused and looked out at the grass. I wasn't thinking about myself, he said. I was thinking about all the people who never get the chance to prove who they are, about the ones who are never given the benefit of the doubt. Jessica nodded. What do you want people to take away from? This Keenan looked straight into the camera. His voice was steady. Respect isn't something you give only when it's easy, he said. It's something you owe every person, no matter what they look like, where they're from, or what you think you know about them. The segment aired that night. No dramatic music, no fancy graphics, just Keenan's words, honest and powerful, and people listened a few days. Later, the mayor gave a formal apology at a town hall meeting. He called Keenan a pillar of strength and promise, changes within the sheriff's department. This included required bias training and creating community review panels. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a beginning. At the same meeting, Francine Rucker stood up. During the Q&A, my son didn't ask for anything. Of this, she said, her voice was clear and strong. He didn't need a crowd or a camera. All he needed was the basic respect everyone deserves the room. Went quiet. Keenan, sitting a few rows back, bowed his head. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just let the moment settle. Way you do when something is true. Finally been said. Out loud later that week, Mr. Dalton from the pawn shop found Keenan outside Grady's Hardware, the place where everything. You did good, son, Dalton said. Holding out his hand, Keenan shook it. Still a long way to go, he said firmly. Dalton nodded. Maybe, but you moved the line that matters. Keenan watched him walk away across the parking lot, whistling quietly and nodding to passers-by. Change didn't come all at once. It came in moments, a handshake, a conversation, a small shift where there. There was once silence as he climbed into his truck. Kenan thought about everything, and that shoved him against the wall. The faces that looked away and the voices that finally spoke up. Respect wasn't given because of medals or uniforms. It was supposed to be there from the beginning, and when it wasn't, sometimes you had to stand still, calm, and make the world see you as you truly are. But Keenan knew this wasn't just about one victory. It was about making sure no one had to fight that battle alone. Ever again. Days passed, then a week. The noise faded, as it always does. The cameras left, the news vans moved on. Even the crowds, thinned out. Life in the small town slowly returned to normal, but something had shifted. It wasn't just the new policies or the mandatory training. It was deeper than that. People made more eye contact at the grocery store. Strangers gave respectful nods. Children learned Keenan's name in school, not because he was violent, but because he stood strong. Keenan noticed it in small moments. At the post office, an elderly woman handed him a thank you card without saying a word. At the gas station, the clerk, who never used to look up now, greeting him, "Good morning, Sergeant Rucker." The world hadn't completely changed, but it had moved just enough to feel it one. Evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky a warm gold, Keenan stood again in Memorial Park. No uniform, just jeans, boots, and a plain gray sweatshirt. He watched kids laugh and run through the grass carefree across the street. Reverend Dalton closed up his church. He waved before going inside. Francine joined Keenan a few minutes later, 2 coffees in hand. "Thought you might want one," she said, handing him a cup. He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Thanks, Mom." They sat on a bench for a while, saying nothing, just listening to the quiet heartbeat of the town. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. Keenan shook his head. "Not a bit." Francine took a sip of her coffee. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us folks who never had the words or the chance." Keenan didn't answer right away. He let the weight of her words settle. "You can't change people's hearts overnight," he said at last. but you can show them what respect looks like to you, can hold up a mirror and make them see themselves. Francine smiled, and sometimes that's enough to start something bigger. They watched as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Kanan thought about the men who put the cuffs on him. He thought about how easy it would been to fight back, to return hate with anger. But he didn't, because dignity. It's not something you demand, something you carry, especially when no one else sees it. That made all the difference as they finished their coffee. Keenan stood and stretched. Tomorrow be another day, more work, more lessons. To teach not through shouting, but by living. The truth before heading back to his truck. He turned to the quiet park, darkening town, and the wide sky. Respect, he said softly, touching his chest. Starts here. All the years, all the lessons, all the unseen battles. Still lived inside. Him life will always test you with choices between reacting in anger or responding with strength. Respect isn't just earned. It's shown in how you carry yourself, even when no one's watching. This story meant something to you. Moment 2. Reflect on the kind of world you're helping create through your words, your actions, and your silence. And if you believe in standing up for dignity, even when it's hard, subscribe and share this story. Let's be the change.